So welcome to the final event of our launch week for the Human Movement and Rehabilitation Research Group. So my name is Alex Clark-Cornwell, and with me today is Alex Chadwell, and we'll be your hosts for this afternoon's extravaganza with our glamorous assistant, Chelsea's Hand. So today is a bit more of a light-hearted event, which is a balloon debate between 5 of our senior researchers. So the debate will focus on the question of which is the key area of human movement and rehabilitation research. So 5 of our researchers have found themselves in a hot air balloon, hoping their research focus will raise them to new heights. So unfortunately, the balloon is sinking and we need to lose some weight. So to avoid being ejected from the balloon, each must convince you all of the value of their chosen research area.
So we've asked the researchers to prepare answers to 3 questions, and then there will also be the opportunity for open questions from the floor. So please, if you've got any questions for the researchers, either to all of them or to individual ones, if you can put those into the Q&A as we go through. At the end of each of the rounds, there will be the opportunity for you to vote to see who survives the balloon journey. In order to vote, we're going to be using a system called Slido. So if either on your phone or on the same computer you're watching this on, you can go to slido.com and then type in hashtag #SalfordHMR. We'll be reminding you of this as we get to the voting. And for the moment, that's all you'll need to do. There won't be any polls open, but as we get to the voting, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen for you to have your inputs.
So our researchers today are Loz Kenney, Chris Nestor, Rich Jones, Malcolm Granat and Yeliz Pryor. So I'm going to introduce them in the style of Victoria Corin Mitchell from Only Connect, with a fun fact just before they each answer the first question. So Alex is going to explain now how we're going to choose who's going to talk first.
Yeah, so the first question that's going to be pitched to our panel is to define their research area and to explain its importance. They'll be explaining why it's the key area of human movement and rehabilitation and what impact it's made to date. Now, for these questions, they'll each have 3 minutes to respond. And in order to decide which of them, sorry, they'll have 3 minutes to respond. At the end of that, if they do go over, we will be stopping them. We do have a gavel. Alex is very excited to make use of her gavel. Sorry, almost forgot to mention that. But yes, to decide which of them goes first, we'll be turning a lovely wheel of faces that we have, which hopefully will come up on screen now. There's no expenses spared here. It is literally made out of the things that were in my recycling bin, which we're sure will impress one of our panelists who's very into sustainability. But for now, if our glamorous assistant can spin the wheel, we'll see which of our researchers is going to be going first.
Okay,
so
is that Loz?
First up, we have Laurence Kenney.
Okay, so Loz, you're going to be first to answer the question on why is your area key area of human movement rehabilitation and what impact has it made to date? So Loz is a professor in rehabilitation technologies, and the fun fact about Loz is that he walked from his home in Manchester to his daughter's graduation ceremony in Sheffield. So without further ado, Loz, we're going to hand over to you to answer the first question.
Lovely, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll rattle on as I'm tight for time. So I originally trained in mechanical engineering, but I've worked on the design and evaluation of assistive devices for about 20 years now. So I'd consider myself to be a biomedical engineer. And biomedical engineering is the application of engineering principles and design concepts to medicine and biology for healthcare purposes. Let's put aside the pivotal role that biomedical engineers played during the COVID pandemic, but the global aging population make it essential that we deliver health both more effectively and more efficiently, and biomedical engineering is the key profession to enable this. And in our area, there's little activity that takes place without the involvement of biomedical engineers. Without biomedical engineers, there wouldn't be devices to assist human movement or technologies to objectively measure the resulting outcomes. And with all the therapy in the world, somebody without a leg can't walk without a device that's been designed, tested and regulatory approved by bioengineers. To give you a sense of the scale of impact, the number of people using walking aids, wheelchairs or prostheses is likely to be tens of millions globally. Biomedical engineers are also the people who can leverage all the other technologies to carry on improving people's health and well-being. As technology evolves, so do the bioengineering solutions. Pacemakers are a good example of this. The first devices in the 1950s were largely external to the body and required a trolley to carry the electronics and the power supplies. Biomedical engineers have exploited advances in other engineering domains to create the miniature smart devices we have today. And such devices not only prolong life, they offer the patient a better quality of life. And similar technologies are being used in our area of human movement and rehabilitation. For example, spinal stimulators are restoring voluntary control of movement to patients with complete spinal lesions. That's worth thinking about. And hundreds of thousands are using cochlear implants to restore hearing. No other field can achieve such demonstrably life-changing advances, nor is as well placed to take advantage of advances in technologies from other domains as they come along. So in conclusion, without biomedical engineers, we'd have no devices for the restoration of human movement and for rehabilitation, nor technologies to capture their outcomes. And moving forward, bioengineers are the people who will translate future advances in software, design and manufacturing methods into clinically useful and demonstrably life-changing outcomes for patients. Being able to walk when previously you couldn't, or being able to hear when previously you couldn't. So improving and prolonging life for people at scale.
Now.
So that was very nice. It did sound like you were wrapping up there. So very, very for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lon.
So, in order to work out who we've got going next, Chelsea is going to spin the wheel again. Just remember, if you do have any questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A. So, next up, we have Malcolm Granat.
Okay, so Malcolm is a professor of health and rehabilitation services. And the fun fact about Malcolm is that when Malcolm was an early career researcher, he was chairing a conference session and he fell asleep during one of the talks. A member of the audience had to wake him up and he then had to make up a question for the presenter. So let's hope Alex and I can stay awake for the next 3 minutes, Malcolm. So over to you, Malcolm.
Okay, thank you, Alex. My area of research is monitoring of free living physical behaviour using body-worn devices. We've used these techniques to develop novel outcomes based on how people actually behave in the real world, evaluating all sorts of interventions in a range of clinical populations such as rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, stroke, etc. This work has also had an impact in non-clinical cohorts where we've looked at the relationship between these real-world behaviours and health. Let me be clear, without outcomes, we do not have evidence-based medicine, and free living physical behaviour is now becoming the outcome of choice. I am confident that none of my esteemed fellow speakers will deny this, and indeed they all have embraced this. This has been evidenced and emphasised by all our 4 recent keynotes. Yes, the ones chosen by my esteemed colleagues themselves. It impacts on all aspects of the work in human movement and rehabilitation. To date, the impact can be evidenced from citations from our own papers and the exponential growth of the literature in this field that have used our technologies and our techniques. There have been hundreds of studies using our techniques, some of these studies using more than 10,000 subjects. Also, our work has led to the formation of new international scientific society, the International Society for the Measurement of Physical Behaviour, a new international journal, and in the last 18 months, the formation of a new multinational consortium, PROPAS, using our techniques to explore the effects of physical activity on a wide range of health outcomes. Putting all this overwhelming, compelling factual evidence aside, perhaps what is more important is this. The chairs of this debate, Alex and Alex, the 2 A's, our future leaders, they are continuing to develop these pioneering approaches. Alex has led Salford's involvement in an NIHR-funded RCT trial or an intervention to reduce sitting time in office population, and this is the world's largest such trial. Alex has pioneered the development of analysis techniques for the evaluation of upper limb prostheses. I would ask you this: what great impact can this work have than this endorsement? My colleagues might argue their particular research is of greatest importance, saying in essence that the foot and ankle is more important than the knee. The knee is more important than the arm. The arm is more important than the hand, and so on. Sounds like a song. But none would argue that fundamental to their own research is the need for real-world evidence. Monitoring of free living behaviour is the area of research that underpins all other areas of research in human movement and rehabilitation. Undoubtedly, this is the only area that should remain in the blue. And to quote our
no quotes, I'm afraid. And thank you for.
Do you feel used after that talk?
I do feel that you're sort of vying for mine and Alex's votes there. So we'll see how far that will take you. But thank you.
Presenting the facts. Evidence-based medicine.
Yeah, it's no more arguments now, Malcolm, I'm afraid. So the next person to be able to pitch up why their area is potentially of greater importance than Malcolm's is going to be Rich Jones.
Okay, so Rich is a professor of clinical biomechanics, and his fun fact is that he once flew in a military Hercules plane during a fighter evasion mission over the Lake District, collecting biomechanical data whilst hanging out of the back of it. So Rich, without further ado, to make sure that you're not hanging over the edge of the balloon, if you want to provide give us your answer to the first question, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think I'll be sort of hanging over the balloon. As probably the smallest member of the group, I obviously don't take a lot of space, so I'm sure I'll stay in the balloon. I'm also not going to babble on like the previous two who couldn't keep to the designated 3 minutes. It's almost like we're being sort of, you know, back in politics again, where we're not able to keep that time. So off we go. So if we think of my area, sort of knee biomechanics and injury, that we can look at health and rehabilitation, and it's the key part of everything we do. The knee bone is connected to everything. It's everything in terms of how we move. And unlike my big four-legged friend here, as you can see, you know, bones are critical to how we're moving and exactly what we're able to do. And if we look at humans in their bipedal nature and how we're moving, all the research that we undertake in this group is related to everything from looking at injuries, this mitigating the risk of injury, informing rehabilitation and how rehabilitation is understood, but also looking to reduce the progression of disease. We know knee injuries are on the increase, both in recreational and elite athletes. And the work of the group has identified all of these different risk factors and interventions to aim to mitigate any of these elements that will progress an individual to disease. And, you know, my former colleagues are probably further along in that age than I am, but we're not going to talk about that today. And when we think from an osteoarthritis concept, and we look at biomechanics, you know, osteoarthritis, and especially when we look at it in the knee, it's one of the biggest burdens of disease. So if we think of where the research that we've undertaken within the group, it's played a key part in human movement and rehabilitation. From the previous speakers talking about movement and physical activity, well, we know that disease impacts on that physical activity. So we should be looking at the interventions and how we allow that disease to reduce pain in order to allow an individual to move better, which then allows Malcolm to be able to do that research. And that's sort of where we're looking to do this, but also improving the strength and orthotic management to some of the key parts, what we've done in the research area. And I think from a human movement perspective, every scenario, whether it be young, old, whether it be walking, running, dynamic movements, they're all there and they're evaluated very much in this clinical practice to both deliver reducing risk, to aid recovery and reduce pain, which are the key principles of what we do. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rich. I didn't even have to use the gavel. I'm so upset, though.
He did say he would stick to time.
Okay, well, thank you for sticking to time, Richard. That might win you a few votes there compared to the previous two talkers. So I think it's over to Chelsea next, or Chelsea's hand. So we need Chris or Yeliz. So
have Rich already.
Oh, so Yeliz. So Yeliz is our only female member of the panel. Sorry, I meant panel. So it's great to have Yeliz here today. Not that we're biased at all, are we, Alex?
No.
So Yeliz is a senior researcher and a clinical occupational therapist, and her fun fact is fun. So Yeliz once spent 2 days in a Turkish jail for political activism, and I will just leave that there and invite Yeliz to answer her question.
Hi everybody. Well, just like the women in research, I come last and the only woman here. And I would like to correct Rich. I think I am pretty sure that I'm the smallest member of the balloon kit here, so I think I should be kicked out last. So Malcolm, especially given a lot of convincing arguments, but I don't know. I don't see it as a hands, arms, and legs. So I'm interested in human and human behavior. So that's a broad concept of rehabilitation, because behavioral science studies look at specifically how humans really make decisions in real world, and what motivates them to put these decisions into actions, and how they maintain or change behaviors over time. So as Los was saying that, you know, nobody could walk if there was no engineers to design things. If a person doesn't want to walk, they don't need to walk, whether there is a device or not. And or they could be the amazing devices, they might not still be able to walk if they're not motivated to do so. So willpower and decision making is quite important. Behavior science encapsulates multiple fields of study. This includes cognitive neuroscience, psychology, economics, and behavioral aspects of biology, law, and political science also. So I'm trained as an epidemiologist by PhD, but I'm a therapist. So I like to take a holistic approach to studying humans, and this enables me to look at research questions from a much broader perspective, to delve into not just the medical, but also personal, social, and economic factors. So behavior science underpins all research with humans and uses methodologies developed in social sciences, mainly running experiments and randomized control trials that allows us to make causal inferences about specific mechanisms, which drives human behavior. As I'm dual trained in quantitative and qualitative methods, I have been able to deliver projects with high impact on the NHS service development, patient and health professionals education, and self-management of chronic diseases, and design therapeutic and behavioral programs to enable people to self-manage their conditions, to lead independent and healthier lives, and continue to contribute to the society they live in by keeping them at work. So most research that we know that it takes about 15 years to get an impact, but I am actually able to deliver it right to the end user very quickly, because I have one hand in clinical practice, one hand in guidelines development and research, and also teaching, of course, because I teach my students to always think about the big picture. For example, findings of the research I have undertaken had resulted in changes into the national and international guidance around how digital technologies should be designed and implemented, who can access this, how we can actually improve access to these technologies.
Thank you, Yeliz. Sorry to cut you off.
So
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Yeliz. That was a very interesting argument from the clinical side of things. And last, we could spin the wheel again, but we're just going to be spinning it until such time as Chris shows up on it. So I think we'll just go straight over to Chris. So Alex, what is our fun fact?
Oh, well, so first of all, Chris is a podiatrist and he's a lead professor within the Directorate of Allied and Public Health here at Salford. And Chris's fun fact is that he loves bargain hunting on Facebook Marketplace, and he once drove around the M60 circular road finding bargains along the way. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alex 1 and 2, for your kind introduction. I'd like to thank my colleagues for wasting 16 minutes of my life listening to you and your pitiful excuses. It's my absolute pleasure to talk to you about why feet and foot health is by far the most interesting and important area of research within our group. And I want to leave you with a very clear message that feet really do matter. I want to also say that this is one of the few areas of research where we've managed to do a genuine mixing of methods from the engineering and biomechanics on one side, all the way through to qualitative research and use of narratives on the other side. I think we often underestimate feet, but I want to tell you that the human foot is actually a masterpiece of engineering and actually a work of art. Those were kind words said by my close colleague Leonardo da Vinci, of course. We've yet to really understand the complexity of the human foot. It is very stubborn in holding on to its biomechanical secrets, compared to hands, for example, and feet. Knees with their 3 bones. It's so simple. We've been doing it for decades. Feet are still as yet undiscovered. 26 bones, over 100 muscles.
We appear to have lost Chris for the moment, and we will pause the clock there for him. I'm not sure if he's hearing us at all at this stage. This is something we hadn't actually planned for, and unfortunately, with him being our last speaker, there he is. Chris, are you back with us?
I'm back.
You are back. Okay, we stopped the clock, so are you happy to just take it back up from where you were? 10 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have no idea what happened there. So it's one of the areas which has really driven some novelty in biomechanics research methods as well, because it's a very small structure and difficult to assess. And we've really literally sacrificed our own feet by having nails drilled into our own feet, just so that we could measure the movements within the structures and begin to understand what it is that foot orthotics and footwear do to us. I also want to lay claim to possibly the cutest biomechanics project ever, where we've been investigating newborn babies and as they learn to stand and then walk. But at the other extreme of the biomechanics and engineering research, I want to remind us just how important feet are in our lives and to our health and well-being, and the role that feet play in our society as well. When we landed on the moon, which was one of my lesser ambitious research projects, it wasn't handprints or knee prints that we left, it was footprints. And the emotional footprint of the human species on that rock in the other parts of the universe is something that lives on strongly in our society. It was feet that landed on the beach at Dunkirk. It is feet that puts people on the streets and says no to Donald Trump. And without feet, we might still have Donald Trump. And it's feet that allow Laurence Kenney to walk to his daughter's graduation in Sheffield, and basically you should get her to the balloon laws. And it's in the spirit of trying to understand the importance of feet that we've been listening to people and allowing them to tell their stories about why feet and their foot health is so important. And I'd invite you all to go to the whyfeetmatter.org website and begin to look at some of the early narratives that we've gone on the website. And I think my case is made.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's getting a bit personal now, so we're going to go over to the Q&A session. So if you're watching, if you want to continue adding your questions to the Q&A session, we can use them now or in future rounds as well. So in terms of the Q&A, it's going to work with that. We'll ask a question and we will go to each of the researchers in a random order, and you'll have 30 seconds to respond to the question. So would Alex 1 like to say what the first question is?
Yeah, so in terms of the order we're going to go to, it's literally just going to be the order you're happening to come up on our screen. So for the first question, we're going to be asking what has been the most significant impact on your research area due to the COVID pandemic? So first up on my screen is Yeliz. So Yeliz, you've got 30 seconds. What's been the most significant impact on your research area due to the COVID pandemic?
Well, I have developed an online program during the COVID very responsively because we had to cancel group programs, therapy programs we were delivering in the NHS, which was developed through my research. and made it available within 2 weeks to the patients to actually complete this online. I've recorded all the videos, interactions, all the information. I even got patient and public involvement to make sure that it's actually the health receiver was speaking to them, and we were still able to deliver that treatment. And other NHS trusts that also employed this.
Thank you very much. So yeah, 30 seconds is a very short amount of time here for our researchers to try and get their points across. I think that was nicely done there, Yeliz. So next up on my screen is Chris. So remember, you've only got 30 seconds. Let's get these points across.
So the area that's been affected most is our work with children, because it's actually based in schools in Somerset. It's a project with Clark's Footwear, and of course schools have been shut down, and of course social distancing and so on measures means that it's been very difficult to access those. So that's been disruptive in terms of a really unique longitudinal set of data, which with Karina Price's help, our KTP associate Michael's collecting. But we hope that will be back on stream really soon, and it's part of a range of other kind of satellite labs that we're beginning to develop, in particular through our KTPs.
Cool, thank you very much. Again, a nice clear point coming across there in those 30 seconds. So next up, remember the question is, what has been the most significant impact on your research area due to the COVID pandemic? We have Laurence Kenney. So over to you, Loz.
Okay, so because we are engineers, we can carry on despite these acts of God. So we've carried on with work on socket design in mixed shed in a farmhouse on the Staffordshire moorlands. We've also carried out with the key glue to our research group, which is beer drinking, and we've done that with the wonders of engineered technologies such as Zoom and Teams.
Yep, nice and succinct. We were about to call you off there, so nicely finished up there. Next up, we have Rich. So Rich, what is the most significant impact on your research area due to the COVID pandemic?
Well, as patients obviously haven't been attending clinics, but also sport hasn't been undertaken with risks, the research has been impacted. But given that our home working has been an approach, what we've been able to do is do multinational research by combining our data with other individuals to form exceedingly good publications. And I think that's sort of where the impact I would be saying.
Yeah, perfect. Nicely, 25 seconds there, so nice and clear. So then, yeah, finally, we've got Malcolm. Do you need a reminder of the question, or are you happy, Malcolm?
No, I'm happy, and I'll answer in 3 words: lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. This has been a challenge for existing patient-facing projects, but it's also been an opportunity to look at the effects of lockdown on people's physical behaviour and to look at evidence for providing advice to policymakers.
Oh, yeah, nice and clear. So the next question, and we'll probably go in reverse order with you here for this one, is how do you involve ECRs in your research? So first up, we have Malcolm.
ECRs are engaged in the research at all levels, from both the conception of the research project all the way through to being part of the application process in any grant application, to delivery, and also the supervision of related postgraduate research student projects. And also they're part of the research group, and they're given opportunities to participate in events such as this.
Nicely added within the time there, Malcolm. So next up, was it Rich, I think? Yeah, Rich.
Okay, well, ECRs are a critical path in our group, and I think in my area there's key ECRs who are actually leading the research and taking major steps forward in what we understand in a variety of areas related to military specific load carriage all the way down to our injuries. So I think it's that innovative thinking from ECRs is ways in which they're actually linking with the research program. So they're key to how we succeed.
Oh, yeah, nicely timed again. I think about the same as your last one, at about sort of 25, 26 seconds. So next up we have Laurence. How do you involve ECRs in your research?
Okay, so we've been, I think, focused on encouraging ECRs to develop throughout our research programme over decades, going back to the late 1990s. As an example, Sibylitis came to us as a postdoc, stayed as a contract researcher for a couple of years and moved to a research fellow, and now a senior research fellow. She's now got her own grants and her own programme of research. And if Alex is open to bribes, we'll keep her on as well.
So we've just run out of time there. Just a quick one. I've realised some of you in the audience may not realise what ECR stands for. So ECR is an early career researcher. So that's people through from their PhDs through those early stages of their career as they're developing as sort of independent researchers. So next up we have Chris Nestor. So Chris, how do you involve ECRs in your research?
Well, I guess I consider my research portfolio projects to be something of a kind of incubator type function. So staff of all levels, including early career researchers, there's a space in there for sharing ideas. We'll try to plug some of those ideas into bigger pieces of work so they get carried along, and those members of staff do as well. And then try to find the balance between that and then developing their own sense of autonomy along with the appropriate amount of support, rather than kind of being cast off and left to do their own thing too early and too much. But it's very much about leaving space for other people to grow and develop their own leadership skills.
Perfect, thank you there, Chris. And then finally we have Yeliz. So Yeliz, how do you involve ECRs in your research?
Well, I don't just involve ECRs in my research, which comes without saying. We always work together, but I also work in 5 different ECR networks internationally and nationally to actually help them apply to fellowship applications. Last year, I was successful on 3 ECRs to get NHR PCAP fellowship to actually apply for prepare for doctoral fellowships. And I encourage them also by posing research questions to them to actually.
Yes. Thank you very much. That's a really nice job there, guys. I know that trying to get your thoughts across in 30 seconds is definitely not something that you guys all have to do on a day-to-day basis, but it is something that's really important as researchers, is to get people interested in our work with short snippets. So you're doing really well here at the moment. So I think we've got time for one more question at the moment, and then we do have some other questions in the Q&A, but we'll bring them in later stages of the rounds. So for now, we're going to ask, how do you make sure your research is realistic and relevant, considering real life limitations, i.e. the costs of rehabilitation devices and accessibility, etc. So I'm going to randomise this a little bit more now. I'm going to go from the middle. So we're going to start with Rich here as the first person to answer this next one.
Okay, so in terms of the devices that we're using, it makes it highly relevant because, as you'll hear me talk about later, they're cheap, they're accessible, we use them, we have good feedback from patients. And I think that makes it really highly relevant, but also practically, and ensuring sort of the patients are at the forefront of any of the treatments. And I think that's sort of key to this area. And I think that's all I really need to say.
Perfect, Chris. You're doing very well.
That's Rich.
Sorry, I've just read the name Chris. You're doing really well at keeping these to time. So that's going very well. Next up, we are going to go to Lawrence. So Lawrence, how do you make sure your research is realistic and relevant, considering real life limitations?
Okay, so I'm going to focus on our Fit for Purpose project, which is a £1.4 million Research Council funded project working with partners in Uganda and Jordan. And we're not only designing low-cost devices, but we're also working with social scientists, clinicians and policymakers to make sure that devices can translate at the end of the research. And we're also developing digital tools to evaluate whether and where these devices are used in practice.
That was very good there, Loz. Hopefully you can hear us right now. Yeah, perfect. So our next up we have Yeliz Pryor. So Yeliz, how do you make sure your research is realistic and relevant, considering real life limitations?
Well, as I consider the humans are at the center of the research that I do, I involve patient and public involvement and engagement in my research from the day one, from idea development to the delivery of the outcomes. When end users are involved with the product development or research development, then it becomes more relevant, realistic, and the limitations are then thought about before they happen, and we can develop strategies to meet those.
Perfect
cool,
timing.
perfect timing. 29 seconds there, so yeah, perfect. And then next up we've got Malcolm. So Malcolm, how do you make sure your research is realistic and relevant, considering real life limitations?
Okay, patient participant involvement is key at all stages of our research, developing the research question, implementation of the research, interpretation of the results, and making sure we chat about what these things really mean in terms of impact to the users, but particularly over a coffee or a beer.
Nice and brief there, Malcolm. And then, so finally we have Chris. So Chris, how do you make sure your research is realistic and relevant, considering real life limitations?
I guess the single word is pragmatism, and we always try to start with an understanding of what the problem is from an external stakeholder's perspective. That could be a company or a clinician or a service. And I tend to find that if we let academics define the research questions, the scope gets narrower and narrower, and the likelihood of it being transferable and applicable to the real world goes down quite quickly. So it's important to have that external stakeholder tell us what the most important things are. Then they're kind of ready, and you've got real world problems to solve.
Now that was exactly on 30 seconds.
Thanks everyone. So that comes brings us to the end of the first Q&A session. And I just want to say that, yeah, Malcolm is really good at taking ECRs for beers at conferences, which Alex and I can testify to. And if we'd thought about it, we could have put some embarrassing photos up, couldn't we, of Malcolm balancing things on his head after he's had one beer. Yeah, but maybe we should save that for next time.
I feel there's a few of them here that are quite good from that side though. So hopefully, if you all go to Slido now, you will find that there is now a poll appearing on your screens. If you go to Slido, there is a poll, and you'll be able to select the 2 people that you want to vote for to go out of the balloon. So here we're looking at whose place in the balloon is now not safe. So select the 2 researchers you don't think should continue to the next round. Now we've got a lot of you on this call, so we might see this moving around quite a lot. And we'll leave it up to the researchers as to whether they want to argue their place any further. We'll just give you a few minutes to do that voting process.
I think it's finished.
Like Trump, you'll be crying, stop the voting.
Oh, I think I might need to put an appeal. Recount. I want paper ballots. I'm going all Trump.
It's just voter fraud again.
Voter fraud every time they get us, Rich. Is your wife voting for you, Rich?
I think she is. I think everybody is. The dog's the dog's sat on the phone.
So it seems like Rich is currently doing very well here, but things are still moving. So it would appear that there are still people voting. I think we've got about 24 by the looks of things, and there's currently more attendees than that, if we include the attendees and the people that are on the call. So we'll give a little bit longer. So for those of you that haven't managed to find it yet, you go to slido.com, type in Salford HMR, and you should from that just be able to start voting. Just click on 2 people, and you can edit your votes if you've changed your mind on who you want to be voting for. It's been changing around quite a lot in that second position, but unfortunately, Rich, it doesn't look like you've managed to argue your way out of the balloon, even by suggesting that you are quite small.
I don't agree with it though. I just don't agree with it, you know.
You sounded like Trump there, Rich.
we'll just give a couple more seconds.
Whoa!
I feel like this is actually really tense because if I close it off and then it changes, you're all going to be at my neck for it.
What do we do? It's like, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
I won't take offence by that.
Keep
I'm
going.
just letting people know that.
There's a little bit of a draw going on at the moment for second place, so we will just wait and see if there's any more votes coming in. Oh, still going.
Oh.
I'm going to give a countdown. So we're going to go 10, 9, 8, 7.
Come on, vote early, vote often.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, I'm closing.
Oh.
And lost.
Oh, we still love you.
So we've gone from our 5, and unfortunately we've lost 2. So the first person that we've lost there is Rich. So I'm sorry, but bye, Rich. And we've also unfortunately lost Lawrence. So going through to round 2, we have Chris Nestor, Malcolm Granat, and Yeliz Pryor. So I think all of us on the call should just give a little bit of a round of applause there.
I didn't realise we were going to lose 2. Wow, it's brutal.
We're harsh, Chris. We're harsh.
Bloody clinicians.
We'll be here otherwise.
Uh,
I'm going to pass over to Alex to explain what's happening next.
I have no idea. I'm just far too excited with everything that's going on. So, but unfortunately, we've got rid of Rich. But remember, he was little. So, Lozzie's quite little too. So not really, it's not helped. And the balloon is still sinking. So we're going to need to lose someone else. So, as you can see from the recent pandemic, working together to address global health challenges is of increasing importance. So the second question for our 3 remaining researchers is, what potential impact can your area have on the future of global health? So, like last time, you'll have 3 minutes to respond. And are we going to go over to our glamorous
We are going to go back to our glamorous assistant.
Okay, so Chelsea's hand.
So first up there we have Yeliz. So you've been introduced already, so we are just going to go straight to you. So we're back onto 3 minutes to respond, remember. And everyone, if you do have questions for later, please chuck them into that Q&A for us.
Okay, does my time start now?
Yes, go for it.
Thank you. So in terms of behavioral science, I'm interested in health technologies, digital health technologies, and pioneering health technologies are creating a new and advanced healthcare services and solutions at a global level. So this has the potential to widen the access to high quality health information and advice for everyone, regardless of where people live, what language they speak, who they are. But of course, this is not without complex challenges, as access to digital health solutions dependent on socioeconomic factors such as access to equipment and internet, as well as health literacy to be able to make sense of the information provided once this is accessed. As this area is growing faster than the infrastructure being in place to support it, a bit like the people in Istanbul start to drive Ferraris before the roads were there, norms, standards, policies and regulations are needed to ensure the investment, as well as sustainability, quality, security and safety of these digital health technologies. And in order to do that, it's really important to get the end users, people, especially those from hard to reach areas, involved with that. So the potential impact of my research will be the contribution to the development of this global guidance as to how to go about this. So the coordination as well as the implementation of these tools and methods required for the adoption and integration into the existing systems and services, as well as upskilling the health force and supporting the patients to actually be able to make sense of this information to self-manage their conditions better. Thank you.
Okay. Nicely timed there, Yeliz. So in order to work out who we've got next, we've got another spin of the wheel from our fabulous Chelsea. Oh, so can't go for Yeliz again.
Excellent work.
Definitely was still turning there. There was no finger involved. So we are going over to Chris as the next person to argue his case. So just as a reminder, the question was, as you can see from the recent pandemic, working together to address global health challenges is of increasing importance. What potential impact can your area have on the future of global health?
Well, beyond the current pandemic, the other global health scare, which is not new news, is the development of diabetes across the globe. And there's some fairly frightening statistics, particularly in developing countries where health infrastructure and social care infrastructure is not yet fully in place. But in places like China, for example, there are some studies which suggest that around 30% of the population will have pre-diabetes. That sort of level and a little higher, you're getting to the stage where having diabetes is almost normal and not having it is abnormal. And this is important because we've been living with diabetes and the risks that it poses for foot health for some time in developed countries. So we do have some insight and some know-how to transfer, although it's not easily transferred because it is converting into a global health and a local context, particularly in areas like Africa and parts of Asia. So I want to propose to you the area we have greatest impact is on diabetic foot ulceration. Ulcers are important because they precede around 85% of all lower limb amputations. In the UK, for example, around 120 a week. Around 1 in 3 people who have diabetes will have an ulcer in their lifetime, and the risk of re-ulceration is 40% within the first year once it's healed. And at 5 years, the survival rate is something like 50 to 60%. So there's a strong correlation between ulceration, amputation, and mortality rates. And in many cases, that's worse than some cancers. The cost of the NHS is just over £1 billion at the moment of diabetes-related foot health problems. I'm using that as a figure because if you then translate that into an area like China, you're talking about hundreds of billions, and that's being delivered through a health and social care system which is structured very, very differently than the ones we have over here. So you're talking about a pandemic of ulcers and amputations and escalating mortality rates. And those are the areas where I think people like myself and Yeliz and others can have a real impact in terms of how we protect feet in areas which have increasing rates of diabetes and the associated foot health complications.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Okay, and last in this round to speak, we've got Malcolm Granat. So for everybody watching online, we have got some questions for the next Q&A, but if we can encourage you to post some questions in there, that would be great. So next, in last in this round, it's Malcolm Granat.
Okay, let me qualify your question and say that there's not one, but there are 2 recent pandemics. The first, to which I assume you're referring, is the coronavirus pandemic, and the second has been the recent recognition of the inactivity pandemic. These are indeed related, and it has been described in the Lancet as a tale of 2 pandemics. For the coronavirus pandemic, there has been 2 strategies. Firstly, the development of vaccine, and secondly, employment of mitigation and control measures like lockdowns to control the spread. I can, with some humility, say that my area of work has no impact on the development of the vaccine. However, for lockdowns, the measurement of free living physical behaviour is key. For lockdowns, a critical element is the restriction of person-to-person interactions, principally by limiting movement and restricting our free living physical behaviour. The most obvious being the new way of working from home. Working from home is the new normal, but this is not some temporary state that exists until we're all vaccinated or until herd immunity kicks in. Many studies have recently shown that this will be the future, even without coronavirus or without another pandemonium of a pandemic. The future is here. As you know, we are living this now. As a consequence of having to work from home, people have dramatically changed their working practices, and this will continue in the foreseeable future. No commuting, no walking to and from meetings, and for me, no going to Starbucks. All of this has resulted in people sitting for longer with shorter standing breaks, taking fewer steps, and having to adjust as to how they build regular exercise into the daily routines. We have seen increased sitting times and reduced physical activity, and in addition, the patterns of these have dramatically changed. This change is now on a mass scale. This is a change that in our lifetime has not been seen. We know that this change will have health consequences, increases in all-cause mortality and many other diseases. Some say dramatic global health consequences. Therefore, there is now a greater need, more than ever existed before, to quantify these changes in free living physical behaviour. We need to understand how these new patterns of behaviour impact health. We need evidence base to develop appropriate policies for lockdowns without compromising health or seriously affecting the vulnerable, older, frail. Monitoring of free living physical behaviour will be the central technique, and therefore this area of research could and will have an even bigger impact on global health than ever before. This could potentially affect all who are touched by the pandemic.
Malcolm. So we're back onto the Q&A, I think. So we have noticed that some of our panelists have started responding to some of the questions in the Q&A. I'm not sure exactly where we have that in the rulebook. You can probably argue that out between yourselves. But the first question that we're going to pitch towards you is, I remember hearing at a conference once that it takes on average 11 years to get research into practice. Does your area of research do any better than this? And from that, we're going to start with Chris.
Yeah, I gave a presentation a few years ago. I found a paper, they did a systematic review, and it was on average, it was 17 years. There was a range of health conditions. I guess it's very difficult within your little silo to accelerate research, the translation into practice, because you're part of a supply chain that supplies the insights and knowledge and practice to the front line, if you like. And there's everything from, let's say in Lawrence's area, there's things like regulation and professional standards around occupational therapy or podiatry and so on. So it's very difficult to really kind of accelerate that. One of the ways of designing out the barrier is to start with people in practice and ask what their problems are. Then at least you know there's an audience for what you're doing before you start doing it. At least you know there's a real need been defined.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I think you literally finished there just as I was coming in. So yeah, just a reminder, these are the 30-second responses to these questions. So next up we have Yeliz.
Well, I suppose the behavioral science must be at the heart of the public health response to COVID-19 at the moment, which is the hot topic. Human behavior will determine how quickly COVID-19 spreads and the mortality. Therefore, behavioral science must be at the heart of the public response. While respondent agencies move quickly to issue advice intended to raise awareness and inform the public and professionals about what we should do, what actions we take, these are all very complicated to follow, as we all know. So because they don't follow behavioral theories and how people think and make decisions. So they need to start looking at.
No, that's fine. Apologies, we are going to have to wrap you up there, Yeliz. Next up,
I had 3 minutes.
That was 30 seconds. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah. So 30-second responses to the Q&A aspects.
Don't make me use the gavel, Yeliz.
Please.
It is quite hard, as I said, to try and get these comments across in 30 seconds. So it might be something our audience wants to.
Sorry, my bad. I forgot. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. So the next person we have answering that question is Malcolm. So remember, this question is about the time that it takes to get your research into practice.
The time taken to get the research into practice actually depends on the outcome of that research. If it's a product, and we've developed a product, perhaps that could be shorter than 11 years. And the product we have developed maybe took 5 years to get into practice. However, getting evidence base to change practice, to change policy and clinical practice is a much longer time scale and can take between perhaps 12 to 15 years.
Cool, yeah, very succinct. So you have 5 seconds to spare. So we're going to move on to our next question from the audience. So this question is, given that we know that conditions such as diabetes are prevalent and growing globally, what is your area of research contributing to prevention strategies? Hopefully that one's quite relevant to all of you, but we shall pass that across first to Malcolm.
Okay, prevention strategies for diseases like diabetes all depend on applying the most appropriate intervention. In terms of applying the most appropriate intervention, we need the evidence that this intervention works. Real-world evidence monitoring, real-world physical behaviour is the main outcome.
Perfect.
Okay.
Nice and succinct there. So next up we have Chris, who has already started to answer this one online, but
sorry about that. I thought it was so cut long story short, we're interested in preventing the complications of diabetes. So part of that is my colleague Simba's PhD work was around early detection of subclinical neuropathy, and that's something that's been now moved across to North Manchester Diabetes Centre. And with Yeliz, we've currently got some, and Dan Park, we've got some work that's looking at wearable systems to measure and monitor the pressure under people's feet and identify peaks in their physical activity, which might relate to increased risk of ulceration. So we're very much at the prevention of things like ulceration and the management of risk for people.
That's your time there, Chris. Thank you very much.
Can you repeat the question for Yeliz?
Yes, I will. So so finally we have Yeliz. So just to remind you of the question, given that we know that conditions such as diabetes are prevalent and growing globally, what is your area of research contributing to prevention strategies? So yeah, over to you, Yeliz, 30 seconds to respond.
Okay, just following from what Chris said, thank you for the promotion of what I do, Chris, by the way, in this debate. We are looking at, so there are very good self-management techniques that can prevent impact of diabetes, for example, but people do not adhere or engage with these treatments. So my research is looking into specifically how we can get people more adhere to the treatment modalities and how they can engage in the long term to prevent worse outcomes and acquire better self-management skills.
Perfect timing there, yeah. So our final question that we're going to pitch to you in this aspect of the Q&A is what is the most important area for research? Measuring and quantifying physical inactivity or developing ways to combat it, such as behavioural change. That might be slightly more lent towards Malcolm's area, but I'm sure that Yeliz and Chris, you can find ways to use that in your own research. So we're going to start this time with Yeliz. So just a reminder, what's the most important area for research? Measuring and quantifying physical inactivity or developing ways to combat it, such as behavioural change.
I'm not fond of what is the most important, because it's all important. Of course, we need to measure and quantify things to understand the prevalence and distributions and the patterns. But in the end, behavioral change, if it doesn't occur, then people, doesn't matter if we say you have to have more physical activity, you shouldn't be sedentary, they will continue to adopt the behaviors they always had. So the behavior change interventions and research is really important to instill this better ways of living. So I would say behaviors.
I've got to put you off again there. And last but not last but not least at all. Next person to answer this question will be Malcolm Granat. I can't actually read the question, Alex. Just
sorry.
Read it out again.
What is the most important area for research? Measuring and quantifying physical inactivity or developing ways to combat it, such as behavioural change?
Thank you. I think in terms of being able to produce a change, one needs to know what change one is looking to produce. So therefore, I feel that measurement and quantification has to come before. However, it does go hand in hand with producing the change. If we want to produce a change, a behavioural change, we want to know what we want to produce, and therefore that will help define what we want to measure.
Perfect. So that was 26 seconds there. So yeah, nicely timed. And then last but not least, we have Chris Nestor. So Chris, just a reminder, the question is around the differences between quantifying physical inactivity or developing ways to combat it, such as behavioural change.
I think the answer to this lies in the evolution of the ideas, and I certainly think historically measurement was the problem to be solved, but I think by and large that has now been solved, and it presents us with a new and very welcome problem, which is what does all this data mean and how do we change it? So I think the tide has gradually changed towards what do we do about physical activity and the interventions that will make that possible, rather than measurement. And I would just compliment Malcolm, because I think his career demonstrates that shift from measurement towards application, and I think that's kind of the direction we're all heading in.
Perfect, thank you, Chris. So we're going to leave the Q&A there for the moment. If you do have more questions, please do still add them to the Q&A, because there will be another round where we will still need questions. I've noticed we've just received another one in there. But for now, we are going to go back onto another round of voting. So if I can get the right screen. So you should now find, if you go back to Slido, a new poll has appeared on your screen. So for those of you, if you did miss the first round, you go to slido.com, type in Salford HMR, and you should get this poll coming up. And what we're voting for here is the person that is not safe. So this is the person that you don't think should continue through to the next round. So the person who is at the top is the person who will not continue. So I'm going to just mute myself at the moment whilst we vote at this end as well. And remember, you can edit your votes, and yeah, panelists, you're welcome to input during this process.
We definitely need some sort of countdown without infringing copyright. We need some sort of countdown.
I'm sure we can sing something to you at this end, yeah.
Are we?
Let's make Research Centre great again.
Chris, you're struggling here. You need to.
I'm just going to get Giuliani on the phone. You hold on.
Oh, it's a draw at the moment. Yeah, getting a bit more interesting. What did Giuliani do, Chris?
Giuliani sweating.
Clearly not done well enough, though.
Hey.
Need that little bit extra push.
I know who you are.
Just keeping an eye on numbers. I think we do still a few. So we're just going to leave it open for a little bit longer, and then we will do a countdown like we did.
Chris, hands up on the desk. Maybe you're voting again or something. I don't know. I don't trust.
So it can only vote once.
Fraud again, is it? Fraud.
Change mind. So you've got to be careful what you say. You don't want to put them off at this stage.
I wish to raise a statistical issue with the number of people. I think it's sample's far too small to also have any sort of confidence with a 4% difference.
The person who did
if you can get more people.
Chris, I'm perfectly happy with the sample size. Thank you.
Well,
yes, weeks decision.
I shan't reply.
Just as a quick reminder, if you go to slido.com, Salford HMR, and you can vote there, it does look like we're probably getting close to the end of our votes. So I will start to count it down. I'm not going to sing it. It's just going to go.
Oh, you see.
I think you should start counting down now. Go on.
Well, we had 80 odd last time.
I think
Longer and
people
longer.
changing their mind. These people changing their mind. They're realising that feet matter.
Last 10 seconds. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 2, 1. Unfortunately,
Shocking.
she willed it.
Bye, Chris.
So we have now lost Chris, and that leaves us with Yeliz and Malcolm. So as we move through to the final, I will pass across to Alex.
Okay, so we've got one more round. We're almost there, but not quite. So it looks like only one person will be able to make it. So the balloon is still sinking. So who will it be who's going to remain in the balloon? Okay, so the next question, or the last question, is in line with our research group's aims, why do you think your research area has the greatest impact on health, well-being, and lifelong mobility? So again, you have 3 minutes to respond to this question, and I'm going to go over to Chelsea to decide out of Malcolm and Yeliz who will be talking first. So Chelsea's hand, if we can go over to the wheel of faces and give it a spin. And it's going to be Yeliz to go first. So I'm just going to read out the question again. So in line with our research group's aims, why do you think your research area has a greater impact on health, well-being, and lifelong mobility? So over to you, Yeliz.
Okay, so what makes us different as an in the animal kingdom as a human is how we behave, not just how we think, but how we behave and how we take action. Even if you look at the recent pandemic, the behavior becomes so important. Look at those countries with clear indications as to how they should behave, did so much better in stopping the pandemic than those. So things like simple things like keeping even hand hygiene or touching people, keeping social distances, these are all behaviors, and they're complex. It depends on the culture, the context, depends on the information people receive, how they interpret this information. And health and well-being is exactly the same. So if we don't communicate health information, advice and interventions clearly, you will be just like me when a boiler engineer comes home and tells me about what is wrong with the boiler, and I just kind of go like that because I have no idea what he's talking about. And most patients look at the research or evidence-based research or technologies that develop the guidelines the same way. They just don't understand if you don't make it understandable, if you don't make it specific, precise to the individuals and tailor these treatments. So behavioral science is getting even more and more important for global health, as globally we are actually celebrating differences. We are all different. We don't now divide things to binary as a woman and man. You know, we all appreciate and celebrate our differences in how we make decisions, and that has impact on health and well-being, the personal independence as well. Thank you.
That's nicely there to time. Thank you, Yeliz. So next up, we have Malcolm on the same topic. So in line with our research group's aims, why do you think your area has the greater impact on health, well-being and lifelong mobility? You've got 3 minutes there, Malcolm.
So thank you. Well, I find myself in the balloon with my esteemed colleague, Yeliz Pryor. You, the audience, now have to ask yourself, which of our areas is of greatest importance? More specifically, the areas that's greatest impact on health, well-being and lifelong mobility. That was the question. Why do I think it's greatest importance? Well, I could go through all the raw numbers, like papers we have published in this area, and citations are very high, and higher than the others that have been in the balloon today. But this might annoy my esteemed colleagues, and I obviously wouldn't want to do that on today. So let us break this down. The greatest impact on health. What greater impact on health can there be in creating robust real-world outcomes for this huge range of healthcare interventions, including the behavioural science interventions that Yeliz was alluding to? Without appropriate outcomes, we, including Yeliz, will never be able to determine what intervention, be it a drug rehabilitation technique, and including digital technology interventions or public health policies, we would never be able to determine which is the most effective and what way it's effective. Greatest impact on well-being. Well, well-being has been defined as the state of being comfortable, healthy or happy. Understanding free living physical behaviour has been described as having a window on well-being. The patterns of these behaviours directly being related to comfort, and also in more complex ways directly related to health. And finally, the greatest impact on lifelong mobility. Mobility is the core of the field of physical behaviour monitoring. Physical behaviour monitoring will give us the ability to continuously monitor this state and provide an impact not only in the aforementioned interventions, but also offer bespoke feedback to the individual. Precision medicine for maintaining and enhancing mobility. This is the future and impact. It will provide evidence for all interventions. To add, these benefits are not confined to any single clinical population or subset of the general population. They're applicable to whole populations. So, a research area which has relevance to health, well-being and lifelong mobility, which can benefit the whole population, must have the greatest impact. I think you've got no choice but to keep me in the balloon and, of course, regrettably, unceremoniously throw out Yeliz. And to quote a TV personality, "'Tis the time to be jolly, 'tis the season to be jolly, sorry, 'tis also the season to be jolly careful who you vote off."
Finished?
Sorry.
Okay, so we just fell asleep there, Malcolm, whilst we were chairing. So I'm sure what you said was excellent. So thank you very much, Yeliz and Malcolm. And we go over for our final Q&A session now. So if we got some questions, Alex, number one.
Yeah, just wiping some of the sleep out of my eyes. I don't know how you managed to fall asleep at a conference, Malcolm.
I've been sat next to him and he's fallen asleep at conferences before.
There's a lot of evidence out there.
Yes. The next question, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I don't ask a question we've already asked. So the next question I have here, I think, is name one piece of research that has impacted on, I believe this means health and well-being the most. Please correct me if that's not what it was supposed to mean. So name one piece of research that has impacted on health and well-being the most. So first up, we're going to go to Malcolm. 30 seconds, remember, for these answers.
Yeah. So it's the use of thyroid accelerometry to determine postures and make accurate measurements of people's physical behaviour in the real world, which has impacted on cohort studies looking at the relationship between real world physical behaviour and health.
Perfect. And next up then we have Yeliz. So name one piece of research that has impacted on health and well-being the most.
Okay, a recent RCT we conducted looked into the effectiveness of wearing arthritis gloves, which actually cost NHS around £5 million a year, and there was no clear effectiveness due to behavioural issues. So we have actually shown that they are just as effective as the placebo, and people can wear it, a £2 worth of gloves that they could buy themselves and have the same effects because they're mostly psychosomatic, and you know, it's to do with the actually joint protection and awareness rather than the compression effect.
Just give us a second. We don't appear to currently have any more questions in the Q&A. There are a lot of comments and potential questions around bias, but I think we've been biased in both directions, so hopefully that is fair. As there's no other questions in the Q&A just yet, we thought we'd give the opportunity for one of the other panelists to ask a question. So those of you that aren't Malcolm or Yeliz, if you just stick your hand up, we will go to one of you for a question now. First hand gets to go. I think that's Chris then. So if we can cut across to Chris. Chris, you've got one question you can ask the other two panelists.
I think the holy grail for areas like ours is the translation of our research into an actual clinical setting and patients wearing it or using it. I wonder if each of the panelists could give us an example of each of those.
Yeah, we went to Malcolm first last time, so Yeliz, it's your turn this time.
I didn't quite understand. Did you mean it has to be a product? Sorry, Chris, can you repeat it?
Anything at all that's gone from the sort of lab or you know, theoretical context through to actual practice, and patients have benefited from it.
Absolutely. So I've designed a 6 weeks group therapy program for management of pain, fatigue and psychological issues in fibromyalgia, people with fibromyalgia, and it's been implemented in the multiple NHS trusts in the UK, and people have directly benefited from this research, provided testimonials which are going to be used for my impact case study for REF 2021. So it was very, very direct translation of all my behavioural research as to how they can actually look after themselves and contribute to their own health and still stay at work and do the independence.
Okay. Thank you very much. So Malcolm, the same question across to you. I'll repeat it, but I might have to get Chris to repeat.
Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. So in terms of the Holy Grail, in terms of actually people wearing it or using it, I would rather look at perhaps policy that this has affected. We know that sitting has been bad for you, long periods of sitting is bad, but we didn't know that breaking up long sitting periods has a beneficial effect. In terms of being able to provide that evidence, the evidence has only been able to be provided using techniques that we have developed. And this has influenced policy directly.
Perfect there, Malcolm. I noticed that you keep saying you've got a bit more time, so just adding in another statement, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
It looks like Loz has a question as well, so we're going to go across to Loz to ask the next question.
Okay, so we all know that research is full of ups and downs. What have you learned from the failures in your in your careers to date?
So Malcolm, I'll put you first on that one.
Okay. I think in terms of failures, I think there's never a failure. There's perhaps a wrong direction, or perhaps there is an outcome that we hadn't expected, which at that time we might perceive as a failure. So what I've learned is never to look at what we see as a failure at that time as a failure, but to have another look at it and to see how we can learn from it.
Perfect, thank you, Malcolm. And then across to you, Yeliz.
Okay, I would say giving up is the only sure way to fail. And so I don't think I believe in failure, because yeah, things might go wrong in research. In fact, I always think things will go wrong in research, and we always learn and do it better the next time, and we anticipate to future research projects with better planning, because we know we learned from the previous failures. So the important thing is to look at the learning opportunities, and I continue to fail, but I don't quit. I just look at, okay, what is my the lesson from this failure?
Perfect, thank you, Yeliz. So just for fairness, Rich, if you want to ask a final question before we move on.
Yeah, so it sort of leads on from Loz's question. So what would you perceive is going to be the biggest challenge in your research area going forwards?
That's to you first then, Yeliz.
Of course, it's always the biggest challenge is funding, getting money. And in digital technologies and behavior, there's so much competition. The industry's got the money, so they're driving these products, whereas in research, we can't get money from biased sources. So I'm trying to keep it independent. And also I would like to keep the products I produce independent, freely accessible to everyone. So that is my current challenge at the moment, to keep everything free and get funding to be able to do that.
Perfect, nice and succinct there. And across to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, I would say there are two basic challenges. One is going from taking our research into implementation and having real impact. But the other one is sometimes I'm faced with this, quite often faced with this, is keeping focused, because we're often distracted by what we find and it takes us off in a different direction, but we have to reflect on that and keeping focused. So that's a challenge.
Cool, thank you very much there, Malcolm. So we are now going to move on to the final voting of the session. So again, if you have your Slido open, here we go. We've got Yeliz and Malcolm. So remember, you are voting for the person that you think is not safe. So the person that you don't think has successfully argued their case and is going to be leaving the balloon. So we have an early lead there from Yeliz, with Malcolm kind of at 60%. Oh, we're now even though. So let's see how this goes. Remember, you'll need to go to slido.com, type in Salford HMR, and you can vote there. Again, I'm going to mute whilst we all vote at our end, and we will come back to this in a second.
It's Malcolm Granat on the outside, Malcolm Granat on the inside, on the inside. Malcolm's on the, I need to Yeliz on the outside, everybody, yes. Oh, it's a light side, but Yeliz right.
We definitely need the music here.
I can play the video again, but then I can't share.
It's nice to see the graphics.
Yeah, graphics are nice.
Graphics are nice, but
Okay, I think we're about 9 votes short. We had 29 last time.
We did. We have been hitting higher than 20 in the past, so I think we'll sort of leave it open for a little bit and see what happens there.
Ooh,
but I think the voting process should be this, certain time, so rather than people might change their minds.
They might change their minds. We need to convince them not to change their mind, unfortunately. We're trying to leave this open just long enough that people can make sure they've understood how the system works. I'm hoping by now you've all got it. But yes, I'm just keeping a quick eye on the numbers. There are slightly more people that we think should be responding, so we'll give it a little bit longer. So yeah, just a reminder, if you haven't yet voted, please go to slido.com, Salford HMR, and vote for the person that you think is not safe. And Malcolm, I don't know if you've got anything else that you want to try and convince them, but it does seem like you're not doing that well at this stage.
Well, I'm in Starbucks, you see, you know.
Right, I'm going to start the countdown now.
Oh,
So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it seems like at the end of that, Malcolm Granat has unfortunately stopped, which leaves us with Yeliz Pryor as our winner. We have fireworks. Boom, boom. Congratulations, Yeliz.
Thank you, everybody. I wouldn't be anyone without you. So, you know, I look for your votes. Thank you very much. I'll try to be worthy of it with the policies I develop. Sorry, this is not politics.
Thank you, everyone.
I don't know, Malcolm, if you wanted to add anything just at the close of this week.
Yeah, no, just a couple of observations. This week's been exciting. We've managed to pull together 4 seminars and a debate, and with good attendance, lovely presentations, and we've got a lovely resource there. So first of all, thank you to all who participated in the presentations and in the organisations. And also particularly, can I thank our 2 chairs today, Alex and Alex. Okay, thank you very much. Particularly, and Alex, I want my gavel back, please. And also, can I just reserve thanks again to Alex, Chelsea and Jasmine for putting in a huge amount of work in the last few months, and particularly in the close run-up to our launch event, in making this a highly successful event that's not only displayed our work to everyone, but has also brought us together as a group. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, very good. Really excellent work. Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks, Malcolm. So we just want to thank all our presenters and just say congratulations again to Yeliz for the balloon debate winner. And I think that's it. So it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
Yeah, Alex is too young to remember the 2 Ronnies.
I mean, goodbye from you.
No, I think it's supposed to buy from her. No, just goodbye from her. It would have been.
I did watch it. I don't remember it.
Okay, so thanks very much, everyone, and I hope you've enjoyed all the presentations and the balloon debate today. And if you follow us on Twitter, Alex, what's the Twitter handle?
At Salford HMR.
Okay, super. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.